Hello, everyone. I'm Ilana Weitzman, the VP of Strategic Development at Electric Autonomy. Just over 2 years ago, Electric Autonomy ran a global design competition in partnership with Parkland to imagine the EV charging station of the future. The winning designs would later be featured in Tree Hugger, Esquire Spain, the Globe and Mail, Business Insider, Fast Company, and even a textbook. The whole idea was to help people think bigger than just putting a plug behind a strip mall, and to imagine the opportunities of what an EV-first fueling station could look like, hopefully with a little FOMO. Here's a quick video to share some of the fun concepts that came in from countries like Germany, Scotland, China, Turkey, and many more. Today, that story continues. I'm very excited to welcome to the stage Scott Sharabura, Vice President, Electric Vehicle Charging for Parkland Corporation, and Aniseh Sharifi of the EV Society and Fierce Media. So Scott and Aniseh, we'll start with some quick intros. Scott, I'll have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Scott Sharabura. I work for a company called Parkland. If you're not familiar with Parkland, we're actually one of the largest fuel retailers in Canada, which means we have a very large number of gas stations coast to coast. Between us and our dealers, we have over 2,000 places to buy gas, and across every province. You wouldn't recognize the Parkland brand necessarily, but depending on where you are in the country, you'd recognize Pioneer. Around here, you'd recognize Ultramar. If you go out west, you'd recognize Chevron, you'd recognize Fast Gas, and a lot of the Esso sites, particularly in Ontario, are ours as well. So we do have very broad coverage across the country. We've been serving the needs of traveling Canadians for 50 years. You may wonder how I ended up at an EV conference here. I head up Parkland's EV charging program, so we have been building EV charging facilities. We've hit 55 of our locations now that have over 200 fast charging ports. You wouldn't see a whole lot around here just yet. We do have a handful of locations in Ontario, but most of our network right now is in BC. Serving drivers from Vancouver and Victoria, going off to the cottage, driving all the way through to Calgary. We have very, very dense coverage in BC, and we're looking to be growing quite a bit in Ontario and Quebec later this year and into 2025.
I'm Aniseh, and I have been a long-time EV owner, and I've worked in the automotive industry for quite some time, working at retail and moving up working with marketing agencies. I now own a creative agency, and we work with various electric vehicle businesses.
That's great. Scott, I'm going to kick things off with you. As you said, you're the country's largest fuel retailer, and the company's original desire in sponsoring the competition was to think beyond the traditional gas station. Fueling an electric vehicle is a little bit different. You're stopping on your journey for a longer pause, and you're looking to recharge in all senses. So you realized this new experience wasn't just about the vehicle, but the humans inside. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think there's a little bit of how we've thought about charging is that there's a combination of new and existing that we're dealing with. So the charging experience is new, the charging technology is new, and we do have to think about how that affects the design of a charging station. Now on the flip side, the humans are the same, right? It's the exact same set of people that are driving, right? The same people that are driving EVs today were driving ICE vehicles 3 or 4 or 5 years ago or 10 years ago, depending on how it is. It's the same people with the same needs, with the same families, with the same driving occasions, with the same bathroom needs, with the same hunger needs. And that matters an awful lot, right? If you think about just the plug itself, you're missing out, we believe anyway, that you're missing out on a fair bit of it, right? So I'll give you an example, right? So if you think about gas stations for a minute, have you ever asked yourself why we don't build unmanned fuel pumps and put them in the back corner of a large shopping mall? And just kind of go up and have like a credit card swipe or an app or something like that to activate the pump and get it going. Has anybody ever seen a gas station like that ever in their lives? They do exist, by the way. And like it's technically possible to do. There are some places in the world where they do exist. And from an engineering perspective, it's entirely possible to do that, but we never, ever, ever do that. And the main reason for that is because of the humans. We want to have a very good, solid customer experience for the people, for the humans that are coming to our sites. This is not just about serving the needs of the cars, it's about serving the needs of the people. Parkland, I mentioned we've been in the business for 50 years of serving traveling Canadians. Up until now, it's been entirely through fuel, but it does give us a little bit of insight as to how people travel. Across our network, across Canada and then stretching into the US and into the Caribbean, we actually serve over 1 million customers every single day. 1 million people that are looking to refuel right now, and 1 million people that in the future they're going to be looking to recharge, right? And with 1 million iterations per day, we have a very good sense, and we spend a lot of time and effort to understand in the 5 minutes that they refuel, what do they do on site, right? How do they behave? What are they expecting? We understand what a site looks like in the winter. We understand what a site looks like in the summer at 2 p.m., at 2 a.m. There's a lot of effort that goes into making sure that that 5 minutes is actually going to be a good 5-minute session for drivers. We have so much time and effort that goes into that, and right now it's not necessarily going into what it looks like for a charging experience, right? I'll tell you, when we design our locations, a lot of thought goes into how to design the locations. The gas pump itself is actually the least interesting part of what it's like to design a gas station. Everything else, we spend so much time to figure out how customers are going to react. And yes, there's a gas pump in there, and there's a handful of things in there that are kind of interesting. And I think right now we're spending so much time thinking about the plug and the electrical infrastructure that's behind it. Our guiding principle as we've been building our network is that it's more than just the plug, right? We have to think about everything else that the humans are looking for and that the humans need as they come in and recharge at one of our locations. And this is what we really liked about the competition, was that this was an opportunity. I mean, the request didn't go out to a bunch of engineers to say, hey, design a charging station, right? It went out to designers and it went out to architects. And basically the remit was, like, ignore the engineering for a minute. What would be a good, solid recharging experience for the future? And I think that's what we really appreciated about that, was getting rid of the constraints of what a gas station currently looks like, to really get the dreamers out there to think about, okay, what's possible out there and what makes sense to start looking at.
So I think when we're talking about the humans, I'm going to turn to Aniseh, who's what I'd call a super user. So Aniseh has been driving an EV since 2018, so going on 6 years, and she does not have a home charger. So I think she deserves a little round of applause from everyone in the room. So let's talk a little bit about that, and tell me all the things you do while charging and what you look for when you make a pit stop.
Right. So yeah, I tried to make the most of my time at a charger. So when I'm visiting my so-called home charger, which is the charger that's closest to where I live, I like to call that my home charger. That's where I'm typically making the visits throughout the week. I'll take things with me because I know I'm going to be there for, let's say, 30 or 40 minutes. I'll take work with me, I'll be answering emails. I also really like to take my nail polish with me because that actually gives me time to just sit down and not touch anything. So I'll do my nails, I'll put something on and watch while I can just relax for a little bit. But when I'm on the road, it's different. We just did a long road trip, went to Florida, and we made various stops along the way. It was a couple days it took us, and so it was really nice to be able to do that with the car. And along the way, you're looking for different things when obviously you're on a road trip. So it was all about obviously making sure that there was washroom nearby, but also making sure that there was good food around. We also wanted to stop and maybe just explore a little bit, grab snacks, grab our coffee, because we're not going to be stopping for the next couple hours. So having a station that has all those things and makes it a fun experience so we can stop and explore a little bit is really nice.
And Scott, does that resonate from what you're seeing with the retrofitting you've done at your charging stations in terms of, well, what are people doing with their time and what are they looking for?
We actually spent a lot of time trying to understand what people do while they charge. I mean, we have spent a fair bit of time going out and observing customers, talking to them, figuring out what they do, and there's a huge range from what you'll see, right? I've seen people putting nail polish on before. There was one woman that I saw that brought her dog down to the local charging station, and her routine was to plug in and then take the dog for a walk. We see people come with their running shoes and they'll go for a jog. We see people going to the local grocery store just across the street. We see people taking smoke breaks, right? And I don't know, people may not think that EV drivers and smokers are like the Venn diagram intersects, but we see a lot of people, they'll take a smoke break. A lot of people, if the weather's nice, people will chat, right? You'll get EV drivers kind of swapping stories with one another and that kind of thing. I have never in my life seen fuel drivers get out of the car and chat with one another at a gas station, but it happens all the time at charging stations. So yes, absolutely, it does resonate. I think a handful of the things that Aniseh mentioned, it's kind of interesting. We're talking about kind of basic human needs here. I want to go to the bathroom. I want to grab a bite to eat. I want to grab a drink. I want to stretch my legs, right? These are not massive asks. These are not things that we should be lightly dismissing. This is exactly what people need to do, right? While they're charging on a road trip. It's things that people need to do while they're fueling on a road trip, right? And so this is, as we've been thinking about designing our sites, not to say that this is the end state, but some of the simplest things that we've been done has been looking at the fuel islands and say, hey, all the stuff that the fuel drivers have, why don't the EV drivers have this? And so you can see the examples up on the page here. You'll see things like having lighting in place, right? Very important for us to take customer safety very, very seriously. We pick safe locations, we put good lighting in there, and we have people there to actually keep an eye on it. We also pick busy locations to make sure that there's always going to be a constant flow of traffic. We have dinged sites before, we've rejected sites before because we didn't think it was in a safe environment, right? Very important for us to kind of think that through all the way. All of our sites have a garbage can that's available because one of the most popular things to do while you're charging is actually to muck out your car because things do accumulate in the back seat, especially if you have small children. Windshield wiper cleaners, windshield cleaners, squeegees, vacuums, quite popular for folks to be able to use. We see a lot of Uber drivers actually coming to our sites, and they'll take the opportunity to clean the car before they pick up their next customer. Quite a popular thing to do. One of the things that's a little bit unique about our sites is that we're deploying at existing gas stations that have employees, right? And I can tell you, as an EV driver myself, I've been to a lot of different locations. I do not see very many locations where there are actual employees that can help you start a charge if you need to. And we've spent a lot of time as a company to work with our frontline employees and to work with folks who may not have an EV themselves and it's still kind of unfamiliar, but we've invested the time to make sure that they can be that first line of defense. They can help if needed to be able to help get a charge going. Right? So we're doing what we can to introduce some of these things. Not to say that's the end state, but I do think there's some things in there that we're drawing the best of what we can from what we know about how to serve travelers.
Yeah, and I think the design competition, I want to say, was originally intended as an ideas competition, which means it was sort of like the concept car of fueling stations. Parkland actually is looking at building the site, which we'll get to a little bit later on. But I think, some of the things that we saw in the designs that were really cool were these beautiful canopies that sort of had an overhang. And obviously in poor weather, that's an amazing experience because there's nothing hazardous on site. You could have the cars pulling right up to the building. You didn't have to separate the experience of fueling and the amenities on site. So you could park right at the big building, which also reduces, sort of the interference between vehicles and pedestrians. If you have a toddler getting out of a car, it's great that they can go right up to the building. And as you said, lighting, digital signage, all these things that can really, really enhance things, and I hope is kind of the end state we get to. But I'd love to ask both of you, what do you think the priorities really are for anyone thinking about the charging experience? What is your wish list, Aniseh?
Yeah, so you touched on some of those, but I would love to have like a little cleaning area, because especially when you're on the road, it's really nice to pull up to a station and be able to, clean, vacuum inside the vehicle quickly, like clean the mats because you've been in there for a couple hours and you've been eating and things, and so of course there's crumbs and everywhere around. So it would be really nice to stop somewhere and be able to clean and fill up on washer fluid. I think it's also just nice to have options, because most stations are quite limited in what's around, so you might have one place to grab fast food, but it would be nice to have options so I can choose if I want fast food or I want to have a nice sit-down meal. It would be great to have maybe a place to walk around, like you said, like a trail, or just be able to like stretch your legs, especially again if you've been on the road for a couple hours. Yeah, there was other things that I can't remember right now.
So I'd say that the point on variety is actually a good one.
Variety.
I mean, again, and think about the gas stations that you're familiar with. Not every gas station is the same, right? Every gas station has its own quirks in terms of how big it is, where, what's next to it, how much space there is to be able to work with. So we do end up seeing quite a bit. And we take a look at every one of our locations and every one of our charging locations to figure out, okay, what can we do here? How much can we put in place? That kind of thing. I think, Ilana, to address your point, I've had a chance to take a trip to Europe, right? And I went to Norway, I went to the UK, went with a couple of members of our executive team to kind of take a look at the future, right? And if folks haven't had a chance to do that, I definitely highly recommend going to take a look there, because it is a little bit eye-opening. At this point in Norway, I think 25 or 30% of total cars on the road are electric, and of new car sales, it's up to 90% of new cars sold. So they're quite a bit more advanced, and they put a lot more thinking into what these things look like. And there's a few things that we saw that I thought were quite interesting, and these are things that aren't drawn from a gas station experience, but we're seeing that are new, that are cropping up. The best ones that we saw out there had a little bit of a kind of airport lounge type experience. Really comfortable seating like this, right? That's kind of nice and comfortable. A barista is almost a requirement in some of these locations, right? It is very much like people are going to be there for a little bit longer. And if you've ever been to an airport lounge, again, you're going to be there for 30 to 60 minutes, maybe waiting for your flight. That's a lot longer than waiting for 5 minutes to be able to recharge your car. So that was something that we saw quite a bit. Sites that had both fuel and EV, the fuel and EV were actually kept separate, right? And that's something that we've actually done some customer research around this, and EV drivers have mentioned this. They actually do like having a little bit of separation between the fuel portion and the EV portion. I don't think it's because they just want to stay away from those icky fuel vehicle drivers, but there was an element of, I want my space, right? I want to have something that is mine, that is built for me, that is not just tacking on a EV charger to an existing space that was designed for fuel, right? So we saw that a fair bit. I think some places, the busier places, are doing some interesting work around queuing. So if a charger is going to be busy, or if a bank of chargers is going to be busy, where do the next cars end up lining up? That was quite interesting to see. And the last thing I saw, there was a real interesting, I think it was a Shell site that was in the UK. So we get asked all the time, are we going to start posting the price of EV charging the way that we post the price of fuel at our sites? This site that I saw in the UK, it didn't have prices posted. What it had posted was like a vacancy monitor, right? So, hey, we've got 12 charging spaces in here. 3 of them are empty, 9 of them are full. And it was a little bit more like when, those of you who remember when you were kids kind of going on a road trip and seeing the motel vacancy, no vacancy signs. It was a little bit more like that. And I'd argue that actually when you're driving, you're probably a little bit more concerned around, look, is there a space available that I can charge at? As opposed to, hey, look, is this charging 49 cents a kilowatt hour versus 54 cents a kilowatt hour? At this point, anyway, where we are in terms of EV adoption, that kind of vacancy marker, I thought it was quite interesting, right? And so maybe there's a chance that will start to catch on a little bit more throughout the industry.
Yeah, I just remember what I was going to say. The road trips. When we were on the road trip, I remember we stopped somewhere. It was like in Brunswick. And there was nothing there. It was just like very open. There was nothing to do. It was just very, very open space. But it was just like it wasn't even a station. It was just like a few stalls. And we wanted to use the washroom, of course. And the closest thing to us was a bowling alley. So we went bowling while the car was charging. And it was really entertaining and fun. And it just added to the experience of the trip. We got pictures and we're like, hey, we just stopped to do some bowling while we were charging the car. So entertainment is fun too.
I love that. I mean, I do think what the competition showed was that you could put a gym, you could put a lounge, you can put an arcade, you can put a restaurant, you could put a bookshop. I mean, I think it's really interesting how you can rethink it. I like what you said about the airport lounge. I think it is a really good way to think about this.
Yeah, I think that's true. Now, one maybe watch out there is that ideally you're going to have facilities that are that appeal to everybody, right? I think this is what in the fuel world, you know, at a convenience store, everybody can find a snack or a drink that kind of makes them happy. If you have a restaurant there, everybody gets hungry, so that kind of makes sense. I kind of like grocery stores. I think there was a conversation earlier about grocery stores because everybody might need to kind of pop in and grab something at the grocery store. Some things, I mean, bowling's a great experience, but not everybody's going to want to bowl, right? Not everybody wants to go to the gym. It is, and so we have to watch out a little bit. That may work well for some customer segments. But it's finding facilities that are a little bit more universal and universally needed. That's where a little bit of the trick comes in, because we don't want to build a station that only appeals to the 15% of the population that might like bowling, right? It's a really creative idea, by the way, this whole charge and bowl. I think that's, we'll have to do some more investigation about that. But I do think, as we've been looking at locations, the universal appeal of certain backcourt options is actually an important factor to consider.
Yeah, and I mean, I like what you said about the social aspect. Again, this idea that EV drivers actually want to interact with each other and how do we create spaces for that to happen, I think is really interesting. As you said, you know, thinking about the surroundings and are there walking trails, are there places to jog, walk your dog. I like the idea of us starting to compute these kind of complementary activities into the mix. When we were backstage, we actually had a really interesting conversation that I want to bring on stage, which is that Scott is also reliant on public charging, not just Aniseh. And that's not simply because you work for a fuel retailer. And I think it's really interesting because I think we de-emphasize public charging in our mindset. We think, oh, home charging, 80% of people home charge. But it's incredibly important to this transition. And I'd love, Scott, for you to share your story, and then Aniseh, your story as well.
Yeah, so I was talking about this with Ilana backstage. So I drive an Audi Q4 e-tron. I've had it for about a year. I love the car. It's been fantastic. I do not have level 2 charging at home. Now, I live, I think Aniseh, you live in a condo, right? So I live in a detached house. It should be relatively straightforward. My electrical panel actually has enough capacity in there, which is fantastic. The electrician said, hey, you should be good. But then the electrician contacted the utility company, and it turns out my neighborhood is kind of at its breaking point for electrical capacity, and there would be an upgrade required, and that upgrade had a customer contribution that was required of about $4,000, which I have not been very keen to pay. And so my wife and I, so we have 2 EVs, and we're living off of one level 1 trickle charger, right? I'd say it's actually worked okay in the summertime. When ranges were better and charging was faster. I live in Calgary, and we do get spurts in the wintertime that get down to -30, -35 for extended periods of time, and that was not fun, right? I mean, you basically can't use a trickle charger if you're on the driveway. Your range is a lot lower, and I was a lot more dependent on public charging than I would have been otherwise. Now, if I had level 2 charging at home, that would be fantastic. I also came back to my team and said, look, the charger the site that's the closest to my house, that's next on the list to get a charger. So there's membership has its privileges, right? Sometimes if you can arrange that, but not everybody can arrange that. So I am struggling with it myself.
Yeah, so when I first got the EV, it was like, 2018. So I approached my condo about it, and they were just not open to even having the conversation at the time. It was just like, it's not a priority. And I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, I kind of accepted that as an early adopter. You make some sacrifices, and I'm lucky that I live fairly close to a supercharger, but had it not been for that supercharger network, I don't think I would have been able to own the EV for such a long time. It has definitely affected, just my lifestyle in general. Like, I do have to plan things in advance, and again, because it's just me, it's easy for me to do that. I can, plan my route. But yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do that had it not been for a very well-established network. That's changing, of course. There are more people in the condo now who have EVs, and I think the condo board has just been approached more. So I think they're just starting to have that conversation. They're still not doing anything about it. It's just having the conversation. So I think if enough people are doing that, then condos are more open to exploring installing like an infrastructure properly for owners. But yeah, I can't imagine driving anything else. So I am looking to move, and being able to hopefully install a charger in my driveway would be a dream. Would be a dream.
Yeah, but I even like the way that you talk about it as though your local supercharger is your home charger.
Yeah,
you've got a local Parkland station that you've got your eye on.
It's next in line, yeah.
No, that's fantastic. Scott, I think you've been kind of approaching this, but we talked about airports as being an interesting model. I think also just the hospitality mindset. I come from a background in travel and hospitality, and essentially you're serving travelers. Yep. How do you think we can think of public charging with more of a hospitality mindset?
Yeah, it's a good way to think about it, and I think this is, as an operator of gas stations, we've always tried to do that, but I think the distinction here is that when you're accommodating somebody for 5 or 10 minutes, it's very different than accommodating somebody for 25 or 30 minutes. It sounds like a small change, but actually it is a huge change. And so yeah, making sure that people feel welcome, making sure that people feel at home, even if it's for a relatively short respite, like still quite a bit longer than kind of what we're accustomed to. And so yeah, we have tried to draw at least a little bit of inspiration for how hotels manage their operations, how airports manage their operations, because they're dealing with longer dwell times than a typical gas station, than a typical convenience store would.
And Aniseh, what would you hope for from these providers? What would make a difference to you?
Yeah, I think it's just about the experience again, and something that maybe there's lots of room for improvement, I think, at some of these chargers right now, but something that I see commonly, and I'm sure other EV owners experience, is there's no one there to address maybe garbage issues at certain locations. And when you do get to a station and you want to empty out your garbage, it's usually overflowing. And so it would be nice if there were if the locations were addressing that, or just making a plan to make that experience better.
Yeah, I think, again, we were having a conversation that you take care of a vending machine. You make sure it's stocked, and there are companies that just go around and make sure that these vending machines work, and they're sort of taken care of. And I think if anybody is looking to start a company, we had a great discussion about how a kind of maintenance, not just of the chargers, but of the sites, get rid of the cigarette butts, the garbage cans, as you say, the windshield washer fluid, and kind of like the way that you have real estate management companies, it would be great to have sort of charger site management companies to make them more hospitable.
Yeah, I think I would see going forward, we're probably going to see more locations that actually do have people that are there. That also means that you're going to need to have larger locations, right? Because you can't keep a person there if it's only a relatively small one. But there's a lot of things that happen at a gas station every single day, every single minute of every hour of every day, that having somebody there to manage it, to make sure that it's okay, we sweat that quite heavily. And I don't see any reason why charging would be any different.
So I'm going to ask, the sort of burning question, which is, you saw in the video the beautiful timber structure by architect James Sylvester. That entry came in from Scotland. It's quite a brilliant design. There's canopy lighting that lights up at night. It's very sustainable. It's packed with ideas. Now, not all of them are feasible. Again, I want to reiterate, this was an ideas competition, but it really kind of spun the gas station on its head a little bit. It's lozenge shaped, which was pretty innovative. And it even thought about all the details. There was a channel for the conduit so that if you needed to replace the conduit and add more power to the site in a few years, you could just pop the panel out and rerun your conduit. I mean, it had what you were saying about vacancies. It had green and yellow lights at each of the charging bays and directionals to say sort of like you're going to this charging bay and it's available. I think there was even an app. Obviously, this is a bit of a pipe dream. You know, maybe one day this is where we will all be stopping on our road trips. But I'd love to hear sort of, you know, in a way, what you've been doing with your sites is a little bit of experimentation leading up to, hey, what would it look like to enact an EV first station?
So what you really want to know is, hey, Scott, where's the site? Where's the site?
Where are the shovels?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I'd say, first of all, we love the design. I mean, it was the winning architect, James Sylvester, put a lot of really creative thought into it, a really great mix of genuinely innovative site design, but also thinking about the practicality and keeping that practicality element of what it was really like to use a facility like that. What's the best that we want to keep of existing stations? He nailed that really well, which is why he won the competition. So a couple things that we've done. So for that in particular, we did a couple things. We actually did start to scout locations, right? To take a look at what would be good locations for a facility like that. We did talk to utilities about what it would take to do. We did also, we've been looking very closely at our existing network to see, look, are there clues in here that would kind of give us a sense for how are people behaving and what kind of traffic are we seeing and that kind of thing. We also started to run economic models, right? And I think that's where, that was a little bit eye-opening to take a look at great facility, but in order to make something like that work, it has to have quite high throughput, right? You've got to have a lot of EV drivers to be able to use it. You don't want to build this and have it be a white elephant where nobody's showing up. And that caused us to think a little bit differently, saying, okay, this would be a big bet, right? This would be quite expensive to build. It's a big bet, and we need to make sure that it's going to be right. You only kind of have one crack at this, and you want to make it a home run, right? And so we've purposely not been rushing ahead to build it. But yeah, there are things that we've been doing to kind of advance the ball in terms of what do sites look like. We did build our first site that had a large deployment. So we do have a site in the town of Hope, British Columbia, which is about an hour and a half east of Vancouver on the Trans-Canada. That is our largest deployment. It's got 12 charging stalls. Up until recently, it was the largest non-Tesla charging site in Canada. I think it's now since been surpassed by a site in Quebec, but it's a very large location. And we've actually been seeing, look, does the traffic actually show up, right? So that's been really good. We've been playing with pull-through charging, right? So we do have a site in Cranbrook, British Columbia, where we actually did put in pull-through charging to accommodate people with boats, to accommodate campers, to accommodate larger vehicles. And we're testing that to see if there's how that works, and is there demand, and is it worth the space that we're kind of dedicating to it. The other thing that we're doing is that later this year, we're actually going to be opening the first site that we have in our network. Up until now, we've been retrofitting existing sites with EV charging. And you have to make all kinds of compromises, like, hey, there's existing fuel infrastructure, so you got to figure out where the chargers are going to go. But later this year in Papineauville, Quebec, which is between Montreal and Ottawa, we're going to be opening our first site that was designed from the ground up to be both a fuel and an EV site. Right now, it's not EV only just yet, but there's a lot more degrees of freedom that we have in terms of making sure that that's going to be a compelling experience for both fuel drivers and EV drivers. And so we'll learn a lot more from that as well. So we're getting there. We're building toward it. I wish I could say, yeah, no, we're going ahead and building it, but it is, we're definitely working toward it. I definitely think that EV-only sites are going to be a thing. We just need to make sure when's going to be the right time to be able to do it, where's going to be the right location to make sure that it's going to be successful.
So Norway in a few years.
Well, Norway has some right now, right? The UK has some. I don't know if folks have ever seen the example of GridServe in the UK, but that's an example we've looked at quite a bit, right? They've got some fantastic examples of EV-only sites. Germany has quite a few good examples as well, right? So I don't think it's that far away necessarily, but those are also larger markets, more traffic. So it is, again, if we want to do this, we want this to be a success, right? And so we're building toward it.
That's fantastic. I do want to open things up to the audience in case you have questions for Scott and Aniseh. If that is of interest, there's microphones in the center here, which you can use. I think it's a really great opportunity. You've got two users here, if you are in the industry, who have tremendous experience in public charging. So.
Yeah, it's working.
Yep.
So obviously the user experience of the charges, like that's sort of the primary concern. I wonder though how your design process also incorporates opportunities for other benefits, sort of broader ecosystem level benefits. I'm thinking of the example of bus shelters that have started to incorporate green roofs with pollinator species on them. These kind of like broader benefits for biodiversity, for stormwater management. Are you sort of broadening the view of your design process to include that level of thinking?
So I think more broadly, we got to remember our sites right now are still heavily fuel focused with EV charging retrofitted on top of it. So as a company, yes, we are taking a look at a lot of those elements, but a lot of the issues that we're dealing with are more fuel specific. I do think the one topic that does crop up a lot around this is people do ask about solar and solar generation to be able to help with the charger management. We haven't done a whole lot on that just yet, and there's a couple of reasons for that. So one is we're operating in, Canada's very lucky to have basically the cleanest electricity grid in the world. Most of our chargers are in BC, which is 95% hydro-powered right now. So there's not much of a carbon benefit available to go with solar versus hydro. Now, if you're in Alberta, if you're in Nova Scotia, where there's a lot more natural gas and coal power, it's a bit of a different story. But at least in the main area we are right now, there's not that much of a change that would happen there. The other piece is if you do the math on how much electricity is generated from the solar panel versus how much is dispensed into a vehicle, it is orders of magnitude different. Just the amount that you need to those cables that recharge your vehicle have an insane amount of power that are going through them, much more than you would see. It would be a small contribution at best. So we are looking at that more broadly for our site because the solar panels can actually power like the refrigeration inside the store and the heating and that kind of thing, but it actually doesn't make that big of a contribution to the power needs of a vehicle, especially as we start to see faster and faster charging speeds.
I'm curious if you look at the solar and a storage component, because if the charger is sitting idle, the solar could be charging a battery, which could then discharge into the car. I'm sure you consider that. Anyway, I'm in front of other people, so
That's good.
Yeah, sure. Hi. First, kudos to you both for driving an EV without having home charge. I feel guilty because I've been waiting. That's been my excuse. I live in a condo and I'm a big EV proponent, but maybe I need to get off my butt and just bite the bullet. And so, Lisa, good on you. But yeah, no, my question is it's a fascinating subject. How we're going to behave in the future in an EV world. So if we imagine, whatever in the future, everybody's driving EVs. How big of a market will public charging be? Because we'll have alternatives. We'll be charging at home. We'll have some destination charging. We'll be charging at work for some people. So today's gas station market is 100%. In 20 years, how big is the public charging market? What market share will they have of our total charging market? That's a key question, I'm sure, for you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and we've taken a look at that, as you can imagine. We actually think there's going to be quite a robust market for charging going forward, especially as EV adoption grows. You're going to get more and more people that can't charge at home, that are parking on the street, that are in basement apartment. There's a lot of different use cases where it is a challenge, and so that is going to mean that public charging is required. Now, I also think that what that means is for companies like us is that's not all going to happen in gas stations, right? That's going to happen, in principle. Anywhere, all you need to have a charging station is electrical service and a piece of asphalt to park your car, right? And that's it, right? There's nothing else that's required. You don't need to dig into the ground and put a tank or anything like that. Which opens up all kinds of different locations, right, to be able to have charging. And so I think that's what we're going to see is that the model of who can participate in charging is actually in the middle of changing in really, really interesting ways. And we're working through how best to participate in that. We're starting at our own sites, right, to be able to just because that's a strong starting point that we have. I don't think it's going to end there for us, though.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you think about traveling Canadians and highway travel, I think that let's call them fueling stations are going to be a critical part of our infrastructure for a really, really long time. But it is true, I think we're going to have different habits where we're sort of, and Aniseh, I imagine this is how you operate, where you're topping your car up the way you might top up your cell phone. So it's I think it's interesting how disruptive that is, that we'll need fast charging, which is what what Parkland is offering at its sites, but there's going to be a charging mix, I think, for quite a long time.
Yeah, exactly. So using third-party chargers on the road, using networks whenever available. Like, I'll charge once a week when I have to. But if there's a charger nearby, like I'll go to IKEA and there's a charger there, so yeah, I'm gonna plug in because it's there, and it's really convenient to have that there. If I go to like a grocery store, like you said, if it's there, I'll top up, but I'll do like the majority of my charging when I intentionally make time for it. Yeah, bit of both.
I had one day in January where I did level 1 charging at home, level 2 charging at work, and level 3 charging at a public charger in the same day, right? It just different occasions, you need different types of charging.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank our panel for this great discussion. I think it's been fantastic. I'm excited to see if that station will come to life. We'll check back in.
Please do.
Every year we have the EV and Charging Expo. We'll check back in, but I love the progress that's being made on the way there, and I do think you're absolutely right that diligence and that analysis and that real understanding as our EV adoption curve is progressing, to understand the needs and take that idea and really adapt it and make it work for life in Canada, bring some pull-through charging in for those boats and ATVs and the things that we haul. I think that's going to be, it's just, as I said, the story continues today, but I think it's really just the start of that story, and we'll keep checking back in. Thanks, everyone.